Hello everyone, Wednesday morning. Here is your latest dose of daily Celtic chat. Yeah, I was kind of, as I always do, looking to see what's happening today, what I could tell you about. Truth is that there is not much happening. It seems to be pretty quiet. The club's transferred moves for the likes of Benjamin Nugren and Hayato Inamura seem to be progressing, but there's no real definitive update on either of them or the likes of Callum Osmond, Ross Doohan. We do expect, I think, all of those players to be signed. Anyway, we're not really dealing with all that today, but we are talking transfers and kind of squad improvement, I guess, because one position that we probably haven't really spoken about too much this summer is the striker position and what we're doing there going forwards. And I'm a little bit surprised we've not really done that. Certainly in a starting 11 context, clearly Callum Osmond is a striker. He's going to be coming in as some sort of squad player to begin with at least. But it is a crucial position, and I think I certainly feel, and I'm guessing the majority of you feel, that we need to sign a first team ready player to play up front this summer. So I thought we could have a chat about that today. Just before that, the draw for the first qualifying round of the UEFA Champions League was made yesterday. We are not in it, of course. There's a fair chunk of time still to go until we are involved. But for 28 champions, the journey kind of started yesterday with the draw. Obviously not too much relevance here to us, although I must say Shelbourne and Linfield meeting is a pretty obvious one to pick out in the first qualifying round. Now, the 14 winners from the first qualifying round will be joined by 10 new teams in qualifying round 2. The then 12 winners from qualifying round 2 will all be in the draw for our round, which is a playoff round, which the draw for that takes place before qualifying round 3 has even been played. However, there are a few teams that we can't face at all. Copenhagen, Crvenas Vesta, Ferencvaros and Bodo Glimt. We can't face any of those teams. And if you want a full rundown of what Celtic are likely to face in Champions League qualification, what kind of task awaits us in terms of getting back to the league phase, then please check out the video above that I did last week. Thank you. Okay, striker chat today. I plan on just waffling on for a fair bit about a range of topics regarding the striker. We're going to be looking at the current situation, who we have, covering like Adam Idah, Daizen Maeda. Got a few Brendan Rodgers comments from the tail end of last season that give us a bit of an insight into how he's feeling about things. So a few conclusions we can maybe reach based on them. And a number of players we're being linked with, like Matthias Kvistgaarden, Evan Ferguson, a few other players. And then at the end, I will become... suddenly going blank about any scouts in Celtic history. Who's a Celtic scout? I'm not editing this. I'm gonna stay here until I can think of a Celtic scout. I've had to Google it. Who could have had what? Mark Cooper, David Pleat. You kind of forget he was recently put in. Paul Tisdale, I guess, is kind of, he's not really a scout, but he's in charge of that stuff. Anyway, later on I'm going to be doing a little bit of that and potentially come up with a few names that Celtic could be looking at. So yeah, let's kick off. This is the situation up top for Celtic at the moment. So we have Adam Idah, Johnny Kenny. Callum Osmond will soon be joining the club in a free transfer from Fulham. That is going to happen. That's not just like transfer speculation. Like, that is a deal that's going to be concluded fairly shortly. Now, Daizen Maeda played a decent part of last season as a striker too, before finishing the season back at left wing. I think partly down to Jota's injury that Maeda moved back to the left, but from memory, I think he'd already been moved back to the left prior to Jota's injury. Remember, like the cup semi against St Johnstone at Hampden, I'm sure Maeda was off the left because Idah started and Jota came off the bench that day. So, yeah, will Daizen be viewed as a left winger or a striker next season? My gut instinct is that Brendan Rodgers will view and does view Daizen as a left winger first and foremost. The most recent comments we have from the manager on this are from early April, when he said the situation was that Kyogo was the central striker here along with Adam. Daizen played a lot of games off the side and was still effective there. But of course, even when you trace it back to when he played in Yokohama, I feel he can play in that position up top. In January, I didn't want to have to play him in that position because I want the squad to be as strong as it can. But I felt that if we couldn't get a striker in, then there's no doubt he could play there. So there we have it. In an ideal world, I think Brendan Rodgers views Daizen as best off the left. He's only playing up front, I guess out of some sort of necessity, the fact that we didn't sign a replacement for Kyogo. And I think the fact that we signed Jota, and Jota was able to play off the left and looked pretty good for a wee spell prior to his injury, meant that we could go with the front three of Kuhn, Jota and Maeda through the middle, and it kind of worked. So that's, we may see Daizen through the middle occasionally next season. I wouldn't write that off. But I do think that for now and for the purposes of this video, we should view him as a left winger. So that leaves us with Adam Idah, Johnny Kenny, Callum Osmond, who, as I say, will be joining us. Now, that's three strikers, and you may have concerns about those three being the options for us next season. Now, even by Celtic standards, I would find it hard to imagine that being the three we go with for the campaign. Beyond anything else, it's not what Brendan Rodgers wants. A year ago, he explained his ideal striking scenario, and you've probably heard this, but let's just refresh the memory a little bit. So, Brendan Rodgers' ideal striking scenario is three strikers, two what he calls top strikers, and one younger developmental one. Well documented that originally when that plan came through, Rocco Vata was who they viewed that as. Obviously Rocco Vata left the club. Johnny Kenny potentially would be that player at the moment. I think if Callum Osmond comes in, you end up with Kenny and Osmond vying for that third spot. Brendan Rodgers says it's very difficult for a club of this size to have three top strikers. So ideal scenario, two top strikers and a third younger option. So clearly Adam Idah would be viewed as one of the main strikers. As I say, I reckon Osmond and Kenny maybe over pre-season kind of fight it out a little bit to be that third option. My gut instinct would be that Osmond maybe has a little bit more to his game than Kenny, just from what we've seen, maybe a kind of higher potential there. So yeah, maybe we end up with Adam Idah and Callum Osmond as strikers next season. Johnny Kenny potentially goes out on loan. And then we're just looking for, I guess, the star striker. Right, brief Adam Idah chat. It's been well covered by a lot of people. Pretty kind of divisive figure last season. I think a lot of you watching this don't rate Adam Idah. A lot of people do rate him and look at the goals he scored, and I guess some people will be somewhere in the middle as well. I think it's pretty clear Adam Idah will score goals for us next season. He managed 20 in the end last season in his first full season for the club. And regardless of what you think about his overall play, I don't think you can deny that that's a pretty decent total for a player who was very rarely like the first choice. I know he started more games than you'd actually think last season. I think they looked it up and he started like nearly 30 games last season, which is certainly more than you would think. But it didn't ever really feel like he was the option, and he still managed to score 20 goals. And you know, you compare that to like Iheanacho, who managed 5 in his first full season at the club. Even Georgios Giakoumakis managed 17 in his first full season. So Idah's numbers stack up pretty well in comparison to those guys. And generally, I like his attitude. I clearly like his goal scoring. There are parts of his game that really have to come on. I think his build-up play can be pretty frustrating at times, which is even more frustrating when you see him at times. I know people always go back to that game when we won the league at Rugby Park, and 18 months, or sorry, just over 12 months ago, and he was brilliant that night, and he had some other performances where he did some amazing things. I mean, he can do that. You want to see it more consistently, and I do think his build-up play left a fair bit to be desired at times last season, and it does lead you just to the kind of thought that we could really do with like a player, a striker who could come in, could score goals, and can also really get involved in the play, can come short with his back to goal, can link the play. Because I just feel we missed that. We lacked that a fair bit last season between Idah and, to be honest, Kyogo as well, who wasn't the Kyogo that we saw under Ange last season. I don't think Kyogo was able to play in Brendan Rodgers' system to the same extent. He wasn't. Kyogo's strength was running in behind, and I think Brendan Rodgers' game plan is best fitted to a striker who can do a bit of that, like Moussa Dembele did, like Odsonne Edouard did a bit, I guess, but can also come short and get involved and play with their back to goal and link the play, certainly like Odsonne Edouard did and like Moussa Dembele did. I'm not specifically talking about the club re-signing like Moussa Dembele or Odsonne Edouard, but someone of that mould, someone who can like have that effect on the team like Moussa Dembele did when he arrived at the club in 2016, and like the overall quality of the team just went up from having that star at the pointy end of the pitch. And Odsonne Edouard had a similar effect. Like Odsonne Edouard in like 2018, 2019, maybe not 2020. Oh yeah, to be honest, 2020 as well, was our best player. He was the star of the show. What would you give for Celtic to have a striker who was the star man again, like Moussa Dembele was under Brendan Rodgers? I think we're missing a few things in the team at the moment. We're not going to go into all the other positions, like midfield's gone a bit stale. For me, one of the big things is that striker position. Can we get like a total game changer, like a big signing up front who can just offer his quality and offer his goals? I think we've lacked that. So I guess the question now would be, will Celtic go out and actually sign a striker like that? Who could it be? Brendan Rodgers did make comments as well early last year when he spoke about it probably being easier for the club to sign a top winger than a top striker, which kind of got me wondering whether the club will go down that route in the end, and we might look to sign a left winger. We've certainly been linked with a fair few wingers so far, and then play Daizen Maeda as a striker. I would hope that wouldn't be the case, because again, you only have to bring back up those Brendan Rodgers comments. He wanted a striker in January. He'll want a striker now. So who could we be talking here? Well, Matthias Kvistgaarden, alarm everyone. He's been mentioned for what seems like years at this stage. Brøndby striker, Danish, up and coming, scores a lot of goals. Recent report from the Daily Record, I think around a week ago, saying that we had dropped out of the race to sign him. Brøndby are looking at something like £12 million for him now. I think every day that fee just goes up, and I think there's real interest from clubs in the top 5 leagues in Kvistgaarden as well. So kind of feels like that chapter is closing or is ending. Doors close, Hamish, don't they? Chapters end. So it seems like that's not going to be happening. We were linked with Kelechi Iheanacho in January. He was at Sevilla. He then went out on loan to Middlesbrough. I don't know what stage the Celtic interest got to. I think the chat at the time was that he'd chosen Middlesbrough over us. He scored 1 goal in 15 championship games for Middlesbrough, so not a great loan spell, clearly. But would you really be too surprised if his name came up again, just given that he's worked with Brendan Rodgers in the past, and we have pretty recent evidence of Celtic and Brendan Rodgers going for players he's worked with in the past, like Kasper Schmeichel, Kieran Tierney. So you wouldn't be massively surprised if his name popped up again. Like, I really wouldn't be surprised if we got a report tomorrow morning or tonight or whatever saying Kelechi Iheanacho back on Celtic radar. The most interesting name at the moment, I think, is Evan Ferguson, the Brighton forward. And this may be one of these internet rumours that is growing arms and legs a bit. Certainly there were some posts on a popular Celtic forum suggesting that a deal will be happening and both Ferguson and Rodgers are keen. Again, it's one you could definitely see happening. A young Irish forward who's just struggling a bit and is falling out of favour at an English club, potentially coming in on loan. It sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? And yeah, you can maybe say Evan Ferguson is of a higher level than Adam Idah. He certainly seemed to be a couple of years ago when he was flying at the start for Brighton, like youngest ever goal scorer for them in the Premier League, potentially the youngest Irish goal scorer in the Premier League as well. He was doing really well, scoring like hat-tricks as well. And then he got a bit of an ankle injury, I believe, dropped away a bit at Brighton, struggled for game time with them last season, went out on loan to West Ham United second half of last season, working with his former Brighton boss, Graham Potter, but he couldn't work any magic with Evan Ferguson, and Ferguson didn't even manage a single goal out on loan at West Ham. Clearly has potential. If we could get him back to the level of a few years ago, he'd be a star for us. Should say we don't know how much interest there actually is here. There's been like nothing really concrete. But again, it's the kind of one you can just see Celtic being interested in because there's the Irish link there, there's the English football link, and we know Brendan Rodgers really likes that. It would just be a bit too much unknown for me with Ferguson. I'd much rather we took a look at someone who was most definitely on the up. So yeah, I took a wee brief look on Transfer Markt. So I stuck in, as you can see, basically top goal scorers from last season, all in top divisions around the world, so worldwide, all nationalities, under 23 years old as well, because I kind of feel like that's what Celtic were looking at. That's been the profile of player we've looked at recently. So again, there's going to be some unrealistic signings here. There's going to be some... Well, look at the first one, Mika Beirith, firing him in for Monaco, I think. He's the one that was in Motherwell like last season. He's doing amazing. Anyway, obviously out with our kind of price range or whatever at this stage. Then you've got other players like playing in Jamaica and stuff that are obviously not going to make the move to Celtic. But there is a kind of sweet spot here with a couple of players. Now, for example, like Louis Montaigne, 23-year-old player playing for Cluj in Romania. Did a wee bit of digging in him. 19 goals in 25 matches last season. Playing for Romania currently at the under-21 Euros. Scored a goal there against Spain. So, yeah, playing in a decent league. Young. Has scored some goals. I think he's got interest from a few teams in Spain. So he's clearly a kind of sought-after player. You get like Arno Calamwendo I looked at, 23-year-old who I hadn't heard of, 17 goals for Rennes last season. Apparently Spurs really want to sign him, so probably a bit out with our kind of price range as well there. Who else did I come across? There's a few players doing it in like Wales, for example. Bradley Barcola, he'd be a good signing for us. And then, yeah, Willem Goebbels, I think I was looking at, and St. Gallen's, he's playing in Switzerland. He previously had been with a few French teams. I think Lyon is a youngster. We know that, you know, they tend to produce pretty good players. Leeds said to be after Goebbels. And yeah, even someone like Troy Parrott there at the top of the list, probably out with our kind of ideas, but, you know, pretty young, doing well. So yeah, that's literally just a few names. I would kind of hope Celtic scouting would be a little bit more extensive than that, but I do think that's the kind of calibre of player we should be looking at. Personally, I wouldn't be obsessed with England. I'm not sure England offers us great value for money. Like, I don't usually get too hung up with transfer fees. It's not my money, etc. But, I mean, you can't deny that we kind of overpaid for Adam Idah, and that's not necessarily a slight on Adam Idah's level. And Adam Idah, as I say, has been good, but, like, we did overpay. We paid a premium because it was an English club and the fees down there are, a lot higher. So I'd certainly be looking at Europe, which leagues of young players broke through and scored a number of goals. Can we get them in and really give them that opportunity? I guess you look at like Odsonne Edouard, and he was a young player playing at Paris Saint-Germain in their kind of B team, I guess, and we brought him in. Could we see something like the club doing that? Could we see the club returning to Japan? Probably unlikely. I'm not massively fussed where the signing comes from. I just think we need a top striker in there, like a real game changer for this squad. Idah is fine, I think, as a player who can chip in and chip in really well. 20 goals last season. There's maybe an argument that if you give Adam Idah the responsibility of being the main striker, then he maybe scores 30. I just think you're looking for a little bit more in that position. And we can only hope that Celtic can deliver that in the closing 2 and a bit months of the window. They've certainly got time to do it. Okay, everyone, goodbye.